we're going to be talking about medical school, what's it all about? And so before we do that, we want to get a sense from you guys about how many of you, by show of hands, would consider or might pursue medicine as a career one day. All right. So we'd say about 25 to 30%. And I think for many of the rest of you, it's important to learn about it because I have lots of friends in medical school who as high school students weren't thinking about medicine as a career. I was one of those people. So it's good to be aware of it as an option. And even if you don't pursue medicine, you'll likely be working with doctors in some capacity through research or business opportunities. So I think familiarizing yourself with the pros and cons of becoming a doctor and how to do it is going to be very much worthwhile for you guys. Okay. So we just wanted to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral land of the Musqueam Nation. And a bit more of a formal introduction for myself. I'm currently a radiology resident. So I've completed medical school. I'm a doctor and I'm specializing right now in diagnostic radiology. So whenever a patient gets an X-ray, an ultrasound, a CT, an MRI, there's a physician who not only looks at the image, but the rest of the medical information and helps to make a diagnosis. Most patients that come into a hospital will get some form of imaging. So in radiology, we are we get to be part of the care of most patients that come to hospitals. And we like to say that the CT machine that patients go through often when we like to call it the truth machine because it can often reveal what condition patients have and can really change the direction of their care based on the radiologist's assessment of what condition they have. Before that, I did something called the MD PhD program at UBC, which is a long program. It's for me, it was 9 years where I completed both medical school, which was 4 years, and a PhD, which was 5 years. And so the reason I did that is because I want to be both a doctor and a scientist, and I want to work at the interface of those two communities, taking the research ideas and applying it to the actual care of patients. Before that, I did engineering physics, and John Nakane, who I believe you guys know, was my engineering physics course lab director. So I worked very closely with him at that time. And one of the highlights of my university experience is I went on exchange to the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. So I lived and studied for 4 months in India. I'm very happy I did that. And I encourage all of you, as you're considering university, to explore going on exchange to another country because it's a very enriching experience. Oh, I also wanted to say I did apply to medical school, obviously. I got into UBC. I didn't get an interview at U of T, and I did get an interview at Ottawa.
Oops, it looks like we're missing my slide here, but so a little bit about myself. I'm a current UBC med student. I'm doing just a regular program though, so mine will be 4 years. Previous to that, I did my undergrad in a Bachelor's of Science at the University of Alberta, which is in Edmonton, which is where I was born and raised. Research-wise, I have an interest in maternal fetal physiology, and I studied how maternal age affected pregnancy outcomes. Outside of school, I really like working with kids, specifically those with autism. And when I'm not doing research or extracurriculars, I do help out with the family farm, or I did when I was back at home. And so that took up a lot of my free time. And that's actually something that I actually included on my med school application. Regarding med school application wise, I got into UBC as well as a couple in Alberta. U of T had an interview, Ottawa as well, but McMaster none. Specialty wise, I haven't decided yet, unlike Philip, but areas of interest that I'm considering include pediatrics, obs-gyn, as well as fertility and maternal fetal medicine, which is like high risk pregnancies, multiples pregnancies. So when pregnancy gets a little bit dangerous, which is super exciting.
Okay, so the presentation outline, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of becoming a doctor, how to become a doctor, what the medical school application process looks like, and how to improve your application, and what it's like to be a med student once you're there. So we're going to pause here and encourage you guys to get into groups of 3 or 4 and talk amongst yourselves about why you might want to become a doctor and why you might not want to become a doctor. And after 3 minutes, we'll come back and hear what your conclusions are. Okay, so go for it. You've got 3 minutes. Okay. So you guys have largely already covered it. I think it is unique as a doctor that people by virtue of you being a physician, within a few minutes of meeting them, they will be sharing with you some of their deepest concerns about their health, about their loved ones. And so you get to have very meaningful relationships with your patients. And I think you guys really covered everything else. High cost of training, yes. Although I want you guys to know that once you're in medical school, the banks will lend you, will make a line of credit available to you to the tune of about $300,000. So you will have to go into debt to get through medical school, but the banks and the government will allow you to do it. And then at the end of it, you start making money such that you can pay back your debt. You guys already talked about there can be extended work hours. Balancing your life and work obligations are tough, and it can be a stressful job. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, patients will die and will not do well. And depending on your personality, that can also be something that's very difficult to deal with. Okay, other possibilities in the world of healthcare. So I think that's very important to remember. You might be thinking, I want to work in life sciences. I want to understand the human body. I want to be part of that kind of caring, helping people to improve their health. And there's many ways to do that. I've actually asked Josh Ho, who's an undergrad student who has been working with me on a research project, an undergrad in biomedical engineering, to just come and share a few words about why he chose biomedical engineering, just to give you guys a sense of what you can do within biomedical engineering. So welcome, Josh Ho.
Well, I'm Joshua Ho. I'm actually going to my 4th year of biomedical engineering here at UBC. From what I understand, most of you are either in grade 11, grade 12, so either applying for universities or going to universities. So my little speech here can give you a little insight into more about biomedical engineering. But before I talk about biomedical engineering, I'd like to talk about engineering itself, or rather, what is engineering? Essentially, it's the application of science and mathematics to solve problems. And as you specialize in a type of engineering, your type of problems also narrow. So in the world of biomedical engineering, your problems are more focused toward the medical world. You'll be creating solutions geared toward helping doctors, medical professionals. And it could be mechanical, it could be biologically focused, it could be electrical, or it could be even software related. And that's where my interest in biomedical stems from. We act as the bridge between medical professionals and engineers in order to create solutions, essentially, to help people. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So Josh has kindly agreed to stick around afterwards, so you can ask him about what biomedical engineering at UBC is like. So thank you for joining us today. So biomedical engineering, great option. You're working with doctors, but you're also able to design the tools for doctors. And so in your success, you can potentially scale your impact, and that your innovation could be used around the world to help millions of patients, whereas a doctor is mostly helping one patient at a time. There's lots of other options within healthcare, dentistry, nursing, physiotherapy, dietitian, occupational therapist, respiratory therapist, physician assistant. And then there's a whole set of technologists that also work in the hospital, such as sonographers that specialize in doing the ultrasound exams, and technologists who work that are experts in actually taking the CTs or MRIs and doing imaging for patients. So it's important to keep all of those in mind as you're thinking about next steps in your careers. So in terms of deciding whether or not to do medicine, you can't only rely on TV shows. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes that is not reflected in those TV shows. So reading about the field is important. Talking to and shadowing doctors is important. Getting some volunteer experience such that you're actually in a hospital and getting a sense of what the day-to-day is like there, and connecting with your career center, as well as potentially mentors who can give you career advice, are all good ways to make that decision. And hopefully this presentation will help to help you make that decision as well.
All right, so I guess the next step is talking a little bit about the process and the timeline about becoming a doctor in Canada. The picture there is a guy running a marathon. It's really a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a while. So first step, undergrad. So after high school, it can be right after, it can be a couple years after, according to your own timeline. Getting into a recognized university undergraduate degree program, it doesn't necessarily have to be science. As you can see, it can be engineering, it can be philosophy, anything that piques your interest. Some students also after undergrad take additional graduate studies. So some of my classmates have PhDs already, lots of them have master's degrees. So there really is no set undergraduate path before getting into med school. So really doing something that interests you is what we would recommend. So next step, this is the getting into medical school. So you want to apply and get accepted into a med school. So timeline wise, most students will apply in the second year, in the summer of second year. And this is because the classes that people take in second year are actually quite relevant to the MCAT, which is the exam that I'll talk about in a bit. And it also offers an opportunity to do like a trial application before applying in the third year of summer. So that's actually really helpful. Interviews are held that winter after application, and notices of acceptance begin in the late spring or summer. So as you can see by the picture, it's really a year-long process. You apply starting in the summer, and then you don't get in, or you don't know if you get in until the spring or summer of next year. So students who are applying, it definitely takes a lot of perseverance, and having a team of people to support you is really important. So next up, med school. So you want to complete med school. Depending on where you go, it takes about 3 to 4 years. In Canada, Calgary and McMaster are the two schools that take 3 years as opposed to 4, but that also means that they don't have any summers. So med school is divided into 2 phases. The first half, so what I'm currently in, are the pre-clerkship years. So these are lecture-based, more academic. You're not in the hospitals yet. Once we get into the second half of medical school, that's what we call clerkship. You're going into the hospitals and following doctors around and learning what it's like from the clinical aspect of medicine in preparation for residency after med school.
Is that me?
Yep.
Okay, then you become a resident doctor. You are then effectively a junior physician who's practicing medicine under the supervision of a more senior physician. If you go into family medicine, it's a 2-year training pathway. And if you go into a specialty like radiology or surgery or dermatology or psychiatry, that's a 5-year training program. And this is the point where you do start to get paid. The starting salary for a resident is around $50,000 a year. And it's a new kind of era of your medical training in that you're starting to progress and getting more and more responsibility, such that at the end of your residency, you're ready to practice independently as a physician. Except some people, after doing 5 years of residency, then go on to do a fellowship where they get further subspecialized. So in my case, I'm in radiology, so I'm learning about how to interpret radiology scans of the entire body. But when I graduate from that, I'm going to go into neuroradiology because I'm interested in particular in caring for patients with brain disease, and other people will go on and do specialized fellowships in a particular kind of surgery, minimally invasive surgery, for example. So that is one extra step in the training program. So long road, 8 to 15 years from the start of medicine to the point where you are practicing. as an independent physician. So the main takeaway point is it's important to enjoy the journey, because this is going to be a good part of your 20s and your 30s to establish, to become a physician. So you have to make sure you're going to enjoy those experiences to make it the right career decision for you. Okay, questions so far? So any questions that have come up to you guys while we've been talking?
You find it hard to stay motivated on a long journey?
A little bit, but I would say, and Jenelle could probably speak to this too, is once you're in medical school, there's a sense of purpose, because everyone knows that there's like, it's very applied learning, because you need to know this because in a few years you're going to be on your own and you're going to have to be making decisions that's going to affect the patient's life. So I find the fact that it's applied is helpful, and that there's a clear destination is helpful. So on the whole, I personally haven't found it difficult to stay motivated. And the med school does a good job at kind of giving it to you in bite-sized chunks, so that they take the marathon and they actually turn it into kind of 1 kilometer, I don't know, runs. You do your exam, you recharge, you have your summer vacation, then you're back at it. So yes and no. Other questions?
Yeah.
So when you're choosing your undergrad, I know a lot of people think about what courses that will help you in medical school. If you're going from a program that's not very medically centered, do some people find it difficult to learn those courses or have to keep up their grades?
Yeah, so thankfully for the first year, especially the first term of medical school, it's basically a giant review of the basics. So definitely for some students who have had that background in undergrad of the basic science, it's definitely more of a review for them. But for students who don't have that background, say they were studying like religion or arts, they go in maybe a little bit less prepared, but they do get that knowledge. And it's not crazy stuff, so it's not like they're struggling, and there's always people to help.
So the med school assumes you don't have that prerequisite knowledge. So they teach to a person who has done a degree in arts or something. So they will help you to skill up. So it's okay to do a unconventional pre-undergrad.
How hard is it to actually get into med school?
Yeah, we'll go over some statistics in a bit, but generally it's like about 10 to 15% of an acceptance rate. And I don't think there's necessarily like a good answer. I think it really depends on a student and how much perseverance and motivation they have to get in. Should we just do
Let's do two more,
two more?
and we'll repeat the question when they come, just for everybody.
So like content wise, what did you guys really, I know it's a lot of years and lots of work, but what did you guys mainly do for med school? Like you come to class and lectures, what goes on?
So the good news is we have a whole section about what is med school like. So it's nice to get that question, because we will address what you actually do in med school. Yeah.
In high school, did you consider those international programs where you just skip the undergrad and go to med school?
Yeah, we'll touch on that as well. It is like alluring because you can get it done faster, graduate faster. You also get an experience abroad, but the disadvantage is that it's a little bit difficult to come back. But we'll touch on that again later.
Okay, and those pictures are just to show that there's med school parties as well. It's not all work. We dress up. We have end of semester dinners. So there's some play involved in medicine as well.
All right, so let's talk about the med school application process, because it's definitely, there's a lot of details to consider. So few generally accepted requirements. First, GPA, that's just your grades in one little number. 2, a high and balanced MCAT score. So the MCAT, as some of you might know, is a standardized exam that most med school applicants will have to take. You have to take it before you apply. And you want a score that's generally high and even across the 4 sections that I'll talk about in a sec. You also want significant extracurricular and volunteer activities. as well as compelling letters of references from people who can vouch for you and tell med schools what a wonderful human being you are. You also want, for some schools, a high quality personal essay or a statement, and these help to show your personality apart from the lists of things that you've accomplished before your application. And to really seal the deal, having a strong interview experience in that winter really helps confirm to med schools that you are the student that they want. So a little bit of an overview about Canadian med schools. So there are 14 English-speaking med schools in Canada. So this is about 2,500 students each year. Distribution-wise, there are 7 in Ontario, 2 in Alberta, 1 each in BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and Nova Scotia. I know you guys are all not from BC, so maybe one of these schools are close to you. There are also 3 French-speaking schools, and they are all located in Quebec. And so the reason why I mentioned the distribution of schools is because there is a heavy in-province, preference quota for students who live in that province. So say you live in BC, it's definitely easier to get into UBC as opposed to somewhere, say in Alberta. And this applies to all the provinces except for Ontario. So one thing that I'll note, sorry, Philip, is that some students will move provinces for undergrad so that they're actually considered in province for that province as well as the one that they moved from. So one of my classmates in Edmonton was actually from Vancouver. And the reason why he moved to Edmonton and went to the U of A was because he wanted to be considered in province for the Alberta Med School, so U of A and U of C, as well as being considered in province for UBC. So that way he kind of increases his odds while applying. It's definitely a risky move and it takes a lot of financial and it's a huge commitment, but it's something that students do consider to get into med school. And lastly, med school abroad. I know we had a couple questions about this. There's the Caribbean med schools, Ireland, India, Cuba, Aruba. Sounds very tempting. You could go to vacation and med school all in one. But they are quite expensive. One of my friends in Australia is paying about $250,000 for tuition for 4 years. Comparatively, I'll pay about $80,000. And in addition to that, it's not very easy to come back to Canada for residency. So if you love Australia, maybe that's the good place to go. But if not, maybe something to consider. So now for some numbers. The way I've written them out, the numerator are the number of students accepted, and the denominator, the total number of students who applied to that school. So just some general acceptance rates for provinces. Ontario has an overall of about 14, Alberta 8%, Manitoba 13%, Saskatchewan 15%. Some points to consider, because I know those numbers are a little bit not the most encouraging. Know that the in-province acceptance rates are higher because of that in-province bias. As well, many of the students who get accepted to one school also get accepted to other schools. So these stats are a little bit skewed. So they're not the most accurate, but these are just an estimate. Now we have to talk about BC because both Philip and I are doing our practice here. So for the entering class of 2021, the overall acceptance rate was 10%. So 288 students got accepted of about 2,900 that applied. Now to show you that in-province bias, BC residents, so people who are considered in-province for BC, they actually had a 20% acceptance rate, so 259 of 1,200. And for out-of-province students, it was about a 3% acceptance rate, so definitely a little bit different. And one of my favorite statistics, or it's really interesting, is that our current class is over 60% female. And that's a trend that we've been seeing increasing over the last few years, especially.
And I will interject here to mention that Jenelle is actually one of those out-of-province applicants. So she came from Alberta. So in terms of tips and tricks for how to get into med school, Jenelle has really figured it out. And we're very fortunate to have her, speaking here today.
As I'm sure you'll learn, it's a huge team effort and also a little bit of luck sprinkled in there. And that's really kind of Philip to say. And I guess one unique thing about UBC Med School is that there are 4 distributed campuses because we are the only med school for the entire province. So there are 288 students total, but 192 are here in Vancouver, 32 are in Victoria, 32 in Prince George, 32 in Kelowna. So you do have an opportunity, if you really love UBC, to, if you don't like Vancouver, you could go to a northern site or elsewhere. And there's just pictures of the campuses there, and they're all beautiful. Special considerations, so rural medicine applicants, Black applicants, and Indigenous applicants, there are special routes through the application process that they can apply through. So this often requires writing an extra statement or essay. And interviews, this was actually my favorite part of the application process. I felt that writing the applications was just staring at the computer, writing exams all day, but the interviews is really the time to talk to people and to show off a personality. So of the people who have sent in their applications, about 15 to 20% of these will receive a notice back saying that they've been invited for an interview that happens that February or March. And so for most schools in Canada, the interview is in the format of a multiple mini interview. So it's called an MMI. So there are about 6 to 10 stations. Each station has a different examiner, it has a different scenario, and you kind of go from station to station answering the question. So they're about 10 minutes each. And here you really want to showcase your interpersonal and critical thinking skills. So one question that you may encounter includes, you're a doctor and your patient comes in, you need to give them blood in order for them to live. However, you notice a card that they're a Jehovah's Witness. What do you do? And there's really no right questions to these answers, or they really want to know your thinking process and that you're non-judgmental. And one tip that I have, practice with friends and family. And a lot of people read that book, Doing Right. It's in everyone's bookshelves. And next up is Philip.
Okay. So tactics for improving your application. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about tactics for not falling asleep during a talk. So if everyone can stand up for me and reach up and try to touch the ceiling, that would be great. Swing your hands a little bit. And now 2 high fives to the people beside you. Okay, second high five.
I'm not doing that.
All right. Okay. Thank you, guys. Okay, so back to the presentation. Tactics for improving your application. So 3 requirements or 3 kind of key things to talk about is it's important to have a high GPA, to do well on your MCAT, and to do lots of extracurriculars. In terms of the GPA statistics, this is helpful to see that the average GPA of an accepted UBC medical student was 89%. So if you want to become a UBC medical student, I would encourage you to aim to get 89% in high school so that your marks don't hold you back from becoming from getting into medical school. A few important considerations are that UBC and U of A dropped the lowest academic year. So that helps to bring up your average in terms of getting that 89% that is an average of the other applicants. And U of T drops the 4 lowest courses that you took. And then some schools don't count the spring and summer courses in their GPA calculations. And so that could really affect your application. And so if you know that, it could affect when you want to take certain courses. High and balanced MCAT score.
All right, so the MCAT, the infamous exam. So this is a standardized exam, 230 questions written over 6 hours and 15 minutes, give or take a little bit of time. There are 4 main sections. Firstly, there's like critical analysis and reasoning skills, or CARS as we call it. This is basically a giant reading comprehension test. 2, there's chem and physics, bio and biochemistry for the 3rd section, and psych and soc for the 4th. And so each section has a max score of 132 with a max score of 528. How it's calculated is a little bit beyond me, but it is on a bell curve that's kind of calculated by the MCAT people. Some statistics: MCAT score of an accepted UBC applicant, 514.5, of a rejected one, 511.8. So you might ask, what's a safe score? No like really firm answer, but people generally say about a 515 and a balanced 515, meaning that you have about a 128 in each section and not like a 120 in one and 132 in another. So some tips that I had from writing my own MCAT a few years ago: you want to, even starting now, read lots and practice your critical thinking skills. Picking up a newspaper or reading the newspaper and getting informed is also a great tip to prepare for interviews. Taking relevant university courses as well before your MCAT can actually help reduce the amount of studying that you have to do independently. So biochemistry, biology, basic chemistry, as well as some intro psych soc courses were super helpful for preparation. Signing up early for the test, so you get the test date and location that you want. Study early, don't ignore material that you don't like, AKA, the metabolic cycle. I ignored that like a plague, and that was not a smart move on my part. And the amino acids, know the amino acids. And it's okay to repeat the test. A lot of my classmates have taken the test 2, 3, 4 times in order to achieve the score that they needed. And just a little note, different schools assess MCAT differently. UBC, U of A, they will look at the entire score. U of C only look at CARS. U of T, you only need to pass that 125 score for each section minimum. Past that, it doesn't matter to them. U-Auto, it doesn't even need an MCAT. So if you really don't want to write it, Ottawa is the way to go. So just be mindful of how they assess it so that you can use it to the best of your advantage. And talking about money, MCAT resources as well as med school applications can get quite expensive. So the test itself is $320 US. The textbooks are about $200-300 less if bought secondhand. The AAMC practice question and test, which in my mind is a must-have, is $300. The UWorld question bank or some similar product is also $300. Everything really adds up, but thankfully there are some free resources on Reddit of all places that are really great, and they've been donated by some exceedingly kind past med school applicants. So look on the good old world of Reddit as well. And next slide. Oh, one little bonus thing, Casper test. You might thought you were finished with the ethical scenarios with the MCAT, but psych, Casper test also exists. This is an online open resource test, open response situational test. They're basically peppering you with ethically challenging situations, and you have 5 minutes to type out furiously your responses to 3 different questions. Some schools require it. It's often weighted about the same amount as an MCAT is. So definitely something that I would also prepare for. Usually write it in the month before you submit your application. And I'll let Phil talk about extracurriculars.
If you sit in the chair. So just before talking about extracurriculars, how long is the MCAT?
The MCAT is 6 hours and 15 minutes, but if you don't take any breaks, it can be 5 hours and 45 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, and people generally study for about between 2 to 4 months.
Okay, and engagement in extracurriculars is highly valued by the medical schools because medicine is not all about taking courses and writing exams. You do eventually see patients and interact with coworkers and work in a hospital setting. And so that's why extracurriculars are valued by the medical schools when they're trying to assess who's best positioned to become a good doctor. All right, so we're going to take a brief pause from our presentation and turn it over to you guys back into groups of 3 or 4 to do a little bit of brainstorming about the kind of extracurriculars that are relevant to figuring out whether or not you want to become a doctor, as well as to setting yourself up to be a strong applicant. Go, go.
Sorry, I hate doing that. Okay, any ideas for some things that you could do? Yes, Liam? Yeah, great. Volunteering for care homes or people with who need help. Great idea. Bomi? Yeah, volunteering at hospitals, and that it's double the benefit. You also get to some like shadowing experience as well. Take a couple.
Lauren?
I said Shad.
Amen. Yes, I agree. That is a great strategy. Alex?
Sports.
Yep. Sports, it's a great way to get leadership experience to be in stressful situations. So yeah, Michelle? Music? Yeah.
Work with organizations, work with others, and also
Totally. I agree. Okay, let's power on. So, I think it's important to find an area of medicine that an area that you're passionate about for your extracurriculars, because if you love working as a physiotherapist assistant, then you'll lean into it and really do well. Or if you like leadership in the area of global health, then lean into that and get involved in extracurriculars there. I think it's important to start volunteering as soon as you can. As a high school student, it's even appropriate to start doing that now. To get those experiences working in the healthcare setting is very important. So you can't start too early. And there is no perfect formula other than you should make sure that you're keeping track of what you did and when you did it and who could potentially verify that you did it, because that will all be required on the medical school application. UBC does have a non-academic criteria portion where they evaluate these non-academic things, and they look in there for extracurriculars, non-academic experience, employment history, research, and awards. So research can also be a good extracurricular because you're in a research lab, which involves taking on responsibilities, and that's something that's valued in physicians as well, being able to ask hypothesis-driven research questions and be evidence-based in our practice. And it's important to know about this CanMeds competencies. So the National Medical School Training kind of Association has identified that a physician should be a professional, a communicator, a collaborator, a leader, a health advocate, and scholar. And in medical school, we have particular courses and training opportunities to help us develop those competencies. And so if you can start developing those competencies as a high school student and undergrad through your volunteering and extracurriculars, it sets you up very well and shows that you have the potential to master those. Let's skip that one. And here we go. What it's like to be a medical student. Yeah, quick question from Paige.
I live in like a small town where a lot of this like volunteering or like stuff like that isn't really like brought up or available. So would you have any like advice on like what I could do to try?
I can try to speak to that. So I mentioned that I did a lot of work on the family farm, and for my application, I actually talked about all the things that I did with my family business. And so really it doesn't have to be necessarily like purely volunteering. You can just talk about getting involved in your community, or even helping even your work experience in wherever you live. So really just showing off that you do get involved. It doesn't necessarily have to be at a hospital or a care home. They really want to know that you're putting yourself out there.
And even within a community, it could be, just to brainstorm here, maybe there's seniors that have trouble getting access to healthcare. So you could work with the city council or something to identify if there's any way for volunteers to drive them to the clinic, or advocate to get better internet connections so that your people in your community can have remote video conference calls with doctors. And in fact, the medical school highly values people who have a rural or small town background, because our greatest shortage of doctors right now is in small communities. And so they know that people that grew up in smaller communities are more likely to go back and practice there. So it can also be to your advantage in terms of your application to be from a smaller area.
And one more note about extracurriculars, and it's not purely volunteering or extracurriculars, but getting scholarships and applying for awards, grants, that's also something that schools really look for. So even if you don't necessarily need the money, apply for it so that you do have it on your application. It's always a good push. So med school, there's a few pictures because pictures are worth 1,000 words. That's our lecture hall. There's microphones for every 2 students, so you can like press the microphone and then the camera zooms in on you, and then you ask your question, and your question gets distributed to all 4 sites at UBC. So it's really daunting to ask a question, but it's pretty cool. Bottom, that's anatomy. We have anatomy labs where we get to dissect cadavers. I'm not going to show you pictures of the cadavers because that would be bad. But that's a picture of my friend and our drawing of the vascular system of the neck. Not the greatest drawing, as I'm sure Philip can tell you. That's LSC, so Life Science Center. It's actually on the campus here. That's where all the first year med students take their courses. And I just thought it was really beautiful, the building. That's a pig leg or hand. Not sure if they're different. We're practicing sutures. And then down here, it's our That's just a couple of friends and I. We got orange backpacks this year, which was, it helps keep us safe while we're crossing the road. That's all I can say. So if you move on to the next slide, this is a typical weekly schedule. And so in the red here, 8 to 10 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, CBL. I like to call this, we get to pretend to be doctors within a little group of students. There's a hypothetical patient and we want to figure out what's going on, figure out what's wrong, and figure out what to do. Thankfully, they're not real patients that depend on us, but it kind of gets us in that mindset of going through that process of figuring it out. And then in the purple here, or pink, there are lectures every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as well. They're only 50 minutes long, which is as much as my short attention span can last me. We have breaks, we have lunch, and I find the lectures really interesting. And then next up, we have labs. So at UBC, we have 3 types of labs: anatomy, so we look at cadavers, learn the human anatomy; radiology, which is all about what Philip does. We kind of look at CT, MRI, and ultrasound scans; and histology, which is looking at stuff underneath the microscope. And if you thought it was all school, there is study time in the mornings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And by study time, it's really flexible. You can do what works for you best. And lastly, for the afternoons, there is clin skills or family practice. So we get to go into the hospitals and learn clinically relevant skills, not on actual patients. They're all volunteers who have very kindly donated their time to help us learn. So exams and assessments, they don't stop after you get to med school. Each term has 1 midterm, 1 final, 1 lab exam, as well as the clinical exam, which is my favorite part. You get to go around pretending you know how to use your stethoscope, and it's a really fun time. One thing that's really great about med school, exams are pass-fail. 60%, once you're above that, you've passed the exam, there's nothing to worry about, which is nice. Yeah, you really do get to learn for the purpose of learning and knowledge, as opposed to getting a high grade on the exam. So studying, I'm not sure if any of you guys are curious about this. Do we study? We do, but it is possible to tailor our education to how we learn best. So at UBC, one thing that I really love is that our lectures are live streamed as well as recorded. So I can actually listen to all my lectures the weekend before the lectures actually happen, or the weekend after, so that during the week I don't have to go to classes. I can go out and have a coffee or go for a run or do something else. So I can really make my own schedule how it works best for me. Studying does happen. It is time consuming, but if you build up a routine, it's nice and it's not all consuming. The middle picture, we're supposed to be studying, but we're actually just eating cake. And lastly, we study for learning, as I mentioned, not necessarily for marks, which was a huge mindset shift coming from undergrad, but it's really great. So what it's like, the biggest piece of advice that I got a couple times was that it's like drinking water from a fire hose. So there's so much information being shot right at you, and you kind of have to be selective with what you get, with what you absorb. It's intentional, it's purposeful learning. There are really cool classmates that do really cool things. There's big laughs, good fun. It's not just all school. And life outside of medicine exists. A lot of people have families, a lot of people have pets, a lot of people do research, work at the same time. So it's not just all med school, which is amazing. And one thing that I do caution myself for as well is that it's tempting to become completely consumed by med school, or what the future holds, but it's really important that being a med student or what specialty we choose doesn't define who a person is. And just some pictures of Philip and my time at various med school sponsored non-academic activities. That's Philip at Med Games. It's like a big Olympics event with all the med schools in Canada. Non-COVID friendly drink sharing. We have weepers, which are like big med parties. And this was Camp Make Friends for Philip's year. So they all go to a campsite and enjoy camp related activities, such as this on the top left and the top and bottom left.
Okay, so after you do 2 years of primarily classroom studying, they let you loose on real patients. So you are in the hospital as part of a medical team of residents and physicians. And initially, it can feel like you have no idea what you're doing because there's a lot of practical things like about where are the patients? How do you talk to the nurses? How do you put it in order? All of those things you kind of have to learn practical aspects of doing medicine, as well as taking the theory and applying it in practice to the work that you're doing. Sometimes we joke that it can feel like watch one, do one, teach one, because that can sometimes be the result. And there's this other thing where you're often asked to see consults, which means you would be asked, say, from internal medicine to go see a patient, to work them up and decide whether or not they need to be admitted to the hospital. And as part of a consult, you'd ask them all about their history of their presenting illness, what medications they're on, what brought them into the hospital, and ultimately come up with a plan. Sometimes it can be long hours. So when it's at the end of your shift, you can really feel relieved to be released from the hospital and go home. And that's it. That's kind of the basics of life as a medical student. So we will pause here and end our presentation and take a few more questions. And we are also going to stop the recording as well, so that we can just talk freely.